For people to believe that Donald Trump is behind these executive orders is insane. Donald Trump is a failed businessman who was born into wealth that allowed him to fail up.
And maybe when they said make America great again, maybe they weren't talking about us.
As citizens, folks need to question whether Doge is a legitimate agency.
Trump has been doing a lot of other things too. Why is all the energy focused on the Doge part?
Just like Trump, he's a showman. He wants the attention on him. He wants the notoriety.
This is the Black Summit. I'm Hendrix.
I'm Brooks.
And we got a special guest by the name of AJ Davis, who's a very good brother, who's heavy into the political realm, I should say, and amongst other things as well. So I'll let him break down a brief intro about himself. Go ahead, AJ. Let everybody know what time it is.
Well, how you doing, everybody? My name's AJ Davis. I consider myself a passionate community advocate. I'm someone that takes politics from a upper stratosphere dynamic and breaks it down for kitchen table conversation. So I'm glad to be here on the podcast, and I hope we can have a good conversation.
That's what I'm talking about. Kitchen table conversation.
Yeah.
That's what's up.
Glad to have you on.
Yeah, man.
Well, let's get right into it. There's been a lot going on politically, so I was excited to have you on because you're very knowledgeable about this stuff, way more than I am. And I just want to get into what's been happening politically. We have just embarked on the first month of Trump being in office, and there's been a lot that has happened. And so we kind of want to talk about that. But we definitely want to get into Doge with Elon Musk. We want to talk about that. So I want to play this clip from TikTok, and then we'll get started.
As the president marks his first month in office, there is growing fallout over the mass firings across the federal government. Overnight, federal employees received an email asking them to summarize their work for the past week. Elon Musk adding failure to respond will be taken as a resignation. It comes as his operatives are now working inside at least 18 departments and agencies. Musk punctuating the moment by brandishing a chainsaw at a conservative conference in Washington.
This is the chainsaw for bureaucracy. Chainsaw!
As the president marks...
All right. We now know that they just shut it down, right? They shot down that email.
Yeah,
saying...
Not everybody did.
Oh, okay. So what's the new information on that? Because
So basically, the email itself. So the Trump administration itself has directed the federal agencies to disregard it. Also, the courts have also said, because in that email, it wasn't just like agency workers, there were federal judges that had received the email as well. So right now, the legal guidance is it holds no weight.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right. It holds no weight because there's still a lot of ambiguity about who's actually in charge of Doge. Mm-hmm. Because the Trump administration has been saying, and I guess this might come because of the pressure that's being put on, but the Trump administration is saying that Elon Musk is not the head of Doge.
Gotcha.
And if you go to the Doge website, which again, you risk a lot of things going to see if you're going to get accurate information. There's not a clear hierarchy there, right? And I would even go as far as to say we now, as citizens, folks need to question whether Doge is a legitimate agency.
Okay.
It was created with an executive order, right? And so Elon Musk and Donald Trump would have, their supporters thinking that, oh, well, this is going to root out fraud and waste, right?
Right.
Well, those of us who are familiar with how our government works knows that we have multiple agencies that already do that. Mm-hmm. One most notable is the GAO, the U.S. Government Accountability Office.
Okay.
You can go to that website right now, gao.gov, and it has reports, it has statistical data, and it's a nonpartisan entity.
Right.
And so what I think has happened with Doge, which by the way is named after one of Elon Musk's
Yeah.
meme coins.
I
Which
literally was thinking Dogecoin. Yeah, exactly.
So wait, do we really expect this to be a legitimate entity that's going to root out fraud, waste? Which, by the way, on the way up here, I heard that the SEC has put out that Elon Musk is being sued because of the purchase of Twitter, now X. He did not disclose that he had basically like a majority stake in the company before he waited. I believe they said somewhere in the neighborhood of 11 days. So like you've got that going on, not to mention the fact that Elon Musk, through his Starlink company, has government contracts himself that he was under investigation for with the FAA for non-compliance issues and things like that. So to me, it's a big facade, right? Okay. It's a mirage that this agency is, one, an agency, and two, capable of doing the things that it's telling people it can do.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Trump has been doing a lot of other things too. And I think what a lot of people are wondering is, why is all the energy focused on the Doge part? What would you say to someone who said that?
Well, because one, Doge gets the attention. Elon Musk is a social media company owner. That's number one.
Okay.
So he understands the news cycle. And just like Trump, he's a showman. He wants the attention on him. He wants the notoriety. He's willing to say, "Hey, look at me. I'm doing this over here," which presents an interesting dynamic between him and Trump, because both of them are basically two sides of the same coin.
I know. It's like right now, him with the chainsaw. The reason why I wanted to play that.
Yeah.
It's almost like there's a struggle there with, who's going to be the more showy, Even I was watching a little bit of in preparing for this, a little bit of his interview with Sean Hannity.
Yeah.
And it was funny to see that kind of dynamic of both of them trying to show each other up in a way.
Yeah.
Elon's over there sitting over there making all these little comments and like doing weird stuff.
Yeah.
And like Trump's like sitting there and waiting for his moment to like come out and say something too. It's like, it's kind of it's a weird dynamic, Elon
is someone, and I think what separates Trump and Elon in this moment is their ages.
Okay.
Trump is 78. He's almost 80, so he's almost an octogenarian. So Trump is of an era where your public presentation was a little bit different. Now, he's someone that in his heyday knew how to really manipulate the media.
Yeah.
But also Trump came into his own when it was still traditional broadcast and print media. Whereas Elon is a tech bro. So he's, someone that's come with this new facet of mass communications, social media, and he owns a company. So he recognizes how trends, like the more quirky and outlandish you are, oftentimes the more attention. Yeah. Trump also knows that, all publicity, good or bad, is still publicity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For sure.
So I think Elon is doing what he's doing because for the first time, and I always say this, Elon is somebody that I think has always been awkward in himself. Mm-hmm. I think Trump is too. But Elon is awkward, and he's someone that wants to be cool. He wants to be that hip guy. People be like, "Oh man, Elon."
Yeah.
And that's like, remember when he went to the Trump rally during the election?
Yes.
And in the dark MAGA.
Yeah, I'm not just MAGA. I'm dark MAGA.
I'm like, you could have popped all the popcorn in the world for how corny that was.
Yeah.
But that's him.
Yeah.
Right. He did something similar at CPAC just recently.
Yeah, with the chainsaw.
Yeah.
Because he had it went, I guess, before he bought X, what was Twitter.
Yeah.
He bought the DeLorean from Back to the Future. And you remember, so it had the video have it, it's coming, had it brought in on a truck. He bought the DeLorean, so yeah.
You know, and here's the other thing. When we start talking about Elon Musk, he is someone that loves to boast and brag, but doesn't necessarily follow through. He doesn't. That's why this whole thing with Doge and the refund, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
The first, let's say this here,
You're talking about the $5,000
$5,000
refund.
or 8,000 according to what source you're looking at,
Okay.
right?
All
Because
right,
there's
copy
been
that.
two numbers put out there.
I heard
Yeah.
about the 5.
Here's the issue. Speaker Mike Johnson said at CPAC, at their conservative fundraising conference, that's not going to happen. Here's the other piece. What I need people to understand is there's not even a true consensus on the numbers that Doge is supposedly putting out being accurate.
Yeah.
So, and then the third part, which is arguably the most important part, is any refund to American taxpayers has to go through Congress. So it's not like, oh, he's going to find this and then all of a sudden they're going to start printing checks to go to
American
No,
people,
that's not how it works. And the first stimulus, which everybody wrongfully or incorrectly attributes to Trump, was a product of Congress. The only reason why Trump likes to take credit for it is because he held it up from being dispersed until they would allow him to put his name on the checks.
Right.
Congress was the reason why folks got a stimulus back during his first term.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean, cut you off, but
No.
what I heard about on that whole situation with Doge, I saw something with State Representative Jasmine Crockett.
Right.
Even the departments that they are looking at, they don't have that much overspending. They say majority of the overture is Department DOD. Department of Defense. And I've been in the military. So I know about how our fiscal year is from October 1st to October 1st. So that's where majority of the waste management is at, right?
Yeah.
But they said that he's not really looking at that because that's majority of his contract side. It's Department of Defense.
Yeah.
So he's not looking into that.
Here's the thing. You can go back, let's say, 20, 25 years. Conservative Republicans have always put out this notion that there's wasteful spending. That wasteful spending that they're talking about is discretionary social programs. Basically, I don't know if you guys are familiar with a gentleman by the name of Lee Atwater. You ever heard that name?
Yeah, I heard of him.
So Lee Atwater is from South Carolina, right? He is arguably one of the chief architects of the current conservative Republican lexicon, right?
Okay.
He shrewd dude. He helped Nixon. He is arguably one of the reasons why you have the Southern strategy, right? Lee Atwater. Because basically, if you think about it, coming through the civil rights movement, politically, it was not in favor or in season anymore to just be outright racist, to use terms like colored, Negroes, all of that. So in order to let your constituents know that you were talking to them, you had to change the language. So instead of saying, white voters, you say taxpayers.
Yeah.
Now, somebody hears taxpayers, they're like, oh, I pay taxes. But it was like we call it dog whistle politics.
Yeah.
So Lee Atwater, he pretty much put the blueprint down. And one of the things that became a staple in the language was government waste. And that was code for anything that went to minorities, black or otherwise, that was considered government waste, right?
Okay.
Even though the vast majority of discretionary spending that covered social programs made less than 20% of the total budget. As Hendricks said, the bulk of our government spending is in defense.
Yeah.
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 And I think a lot of Democrats have brought that up for years, that there has been wasteful spending when it comes to defense.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people have wanted to cut the budget of defense. And so I think what a lot of people are looking at now is, for years this has been a thing where we wanted the government to kind of, come in, and we wanted, somebody to come into the government, rather, to kind of cut back on some of the wasteful spending that, has been happening. Taxpayer dollars going to kind of anywhere. And so why it seems like this program would be something that a lot of people would get behind, just taking out the fact that it's Trump and, Elon Musk, right? Mm-hmm. Like, for years, we've been saying that that was one of Bernie's main things. He was talking about how much spending we were doing, and how it was kind of crazy spending, and somebody needs to, cut down on the Department of Defense and all of these other places where we were spending too much money. What would you say to somebody who's saying, well, this is part of it right here? What's happening?
So I would say it's not. It's actually smoke and mirrors, because the agency I mentioned, the GAO, has been there for years. If I ask a person who says, well, I think they're rooting out the fraud and the waste, I would say, so what has been the annual budget numbers for the last 5 years? Could you tell me that? How do you know something is fraud or
most
waste?
people, the regular person, is not going to be able to tell you that.
Right. And so that's where conservatives and Republicans and some Dems have been able to hide in the minutia, right? And so if you want to know where our government spending is, GAO reports are there.
Okay.
Then the other question that I have is, who's truly serious? Because conservatives bring this up all the time, right? Yet it's the conservative-dominated Congresses, when they're in office or when they're in control, they never take the reports. If you guys remember, just a week ago or a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks, the inspectors general, right? When you heard about all of them being let go, the inspectors general are the people who root out waste and fraud. That's their role. Most people didn't know that. And they're nonpartisan, right? They're independent. So they're the ones that review government agencies, government programs, and they say, okay, based on our findings, this, and this needs to change, or here's our recommendations. Those recommendations go to Congress.
Right.
And I think Jasmine Crockett and Ayanna Pressley and AOC, a couple others, have said that for years, there's been the data showing where we have excess. But each time the party that speaks the loudest about government excess gets in power, they don't do anything.
What do you say to somebody who says maybe those people were part of the problem? That getting those people out of the way somehow takes away from, what's been always happening. Because the thing with Washington, let me just say this, the thing with Washington is that they're doing the same old. And it's really not a Democratic and a Republican party. It's the same party to me.
Okay.
And when I look at it, it's like these people have been doing this stuff for years and nothing's really been happening for the people. And they get up there, most of them go home to their $1 million mansions.
Okay.
And they don't really pass anything. I mean, they couldn't even get the George Floyd bill, which is the most obvious thing to pass, passed, So, I mean, it's kind of crazy when you think about that. So there's a system that's been in place for years that hasn't really been, messed with, and it's been business as usual. It's the status quo. What do you say to somebody who says that?
That you're part of the problem.
Okay.
Here's why. And I hear what you're saying, and a lot of people feel that way, and I get it. But what is the term of a U.S. House member? What's the term?
Not sure.
2 years. 2 years. U.S. Senator, what's the term?
6.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, here's my thing. When you look at the system, as people say. I think sometimes we as voters and we as the public want to divorce ourselves from culpability of what's happening, right? One thing I give conservative Republicans that I wish folks who don't consider themselves that, or folks who are on the left, one thing I give them is they understand the power dynamic. They understand that he or whomever is in power gets to make the rules. I would disagree that the people are not getting what they want, because there are demographics and people who are getting what they want. It's just that the everyday people who are thinking that, oh, well, they're just going up there and they're just doing whatever, they're not seeing what's happening. For example, when you look at the fact that U.S. congresspersons only have a 2-year term, and people complain about folks like Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, hell, even Jim Clyburn. Jim Clyburn went to Congress the year I graduated high school. He was my congressperson when I graduated high school. I have moved, lived life, moved counties over, and he is still my congressperson. Yeah. Is he the problem? Or is it the fact that we, as a populace, oftentimes don't understand our role in changing these dynamics, right?
So you're saying that by us keeping him in power, we're the problem.
We're contributing to the problem.
He's saying you vote a member, you're not
saying,
holding him accountable.
yeah, exactly.
That's what he's saying.
So you're saying that like there should be like somebody holding him accountable,
Well,
maybe voting him out if he doesn't do the right thing.
I challenge people on using the word accountability too, right?
Okay.
Because we make not that we can't use it. We make accountability one way. It's always, oh, we got to hold them accountable, right? So my thing is, there's a lot that does not get disclosed to us as the public, right?
Yeah.
When we look at politics, we're looking at one dimension of it. And that's by design that they don't tell us.
Of course.
But it's like, we have to pay attention to numbers. We have to realize that on the federal level, they represent areas that can be 30, 40,000 people, right? There is no way for them to know what everybody wants unless they're actively in the community or they have some type of conduit. Because remember, they have to be in Congress debating on, bills and the like. And it also depends upon whether or not they have seniority, things like that, what committees they sit on. So it's not just we're sending people to Washington. And I challenge people to look at the fact that we've ignored local politics as the foundation for how our national politics go. There are there's a precedence that gets set on the local level that dictates what we will see on the national level.
Okay.
And what I mean when I say that, you will rarely, if at all, ever see, let's say, a red state sending blue representatives to Washington and vice versa.
Right.
You will see maybe mixed legislatures like Republican-dominated General Assembly with a Democratic governor like you have in North Carolina. But even their federal representation is split. So, I tell people sometimes we have to check our expectations of politicians because I say it all the time. Not one politician in Washington or a state house elected themselves. So if somebody says, well, they're not doing what we want, is that showing up at the polls? Because that's the thing.
Yeah. So when this goes, going back to Doge here, what do you think? Do you think that we need to cut back on the spending? What are your thoughts on the way that taxpayers' dollars are being spent? Do you think that that's something? Because to me, that was always a Democratic idea. I mean, just from what I've seen and because I've been a Democrat. My parents were Democrats. So I've been around it, and it's always been like, hey, we're spending too much money over here. We need to cut out some of this spending. What do you think?
So I definitely I think the challenge is because Congress makes the budget, right?
Okay.
So it goes back to the people we send there. So I think the problem that we run into is we start out with this, we have to slash. I believe it's in how we establish the budget. Because I would ask people, how much does it take to run a country? Like nobody ever says that. Like, how much does it take to run a growing country? A country that is a world global superpower.
Yeah.
You know, a country that has ever changing demographic needs. You know, we've got more people aging out and, you know, we've got people being born. How much realistically does it take to do that? You know, and do we have that answer? And then from there, you know, do we have people in Congress who are willing to legitimately sit down, suspend, you know, maybe suspend your party's philosophy and look at the reality of your constituents, right? Instead of saying, well, Republicans, we've always said this is our hard line, or Democrats, this is our hard line, and look at the realities of what it is that we're facing and start there instead of just promising people, oh, we're going to cut this because you don't know if you can.
Yeah.
You know, if you've ever been in an organization or a business or a company and you've done budgeting, you know, you don't know what you can cut until you figure out what you need.
You're right. And the last time the budget was balanced was when Bill Clinton administration.
Yeah, when Clinton
Democrats
was in there.
balance. And that's what makes this so hilarious hearing Republicans talk about balancing the budget because it's always under Democrats.
It's always under Democrats.
Well, when I was listening to Hannity, when I was
he got it right.
yeah.
Oh, you mean Clanity?
So when I was listening to him, he was talking about, they balanced it with the House Majority Leader. I can't remember his name. Newt Gingrich. It was Newt and Clinton. Newt and Clinton together. They balanced it. That's when it was balanced.
That's what the House Republicans had the House.
Yeah.
So that's why he threw that in there.
Yeah,
but
that's why he threw that.
But you know what else is funny about that? I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
So Clinton's second term, one major piece of legislation that does not get talked about as much was welfare reform, right? Because you know conservatives love to throw that out. Oh, we're spending too much money on welfare, right?
Yeah.
For Bill Clinton to get his second term, he had to make a concession to moderate Republicans and Democrats because there used to be what they would call blue dog Democrats, which were moderate Democrats who, in some cases, had conservative leaning ideologies, right? So what happened with welfare reform, and I remember this guy had to do a grad school paper on it. The traditional welfare system was pretty much provided oversight, federal government, Senate to states, and basically they managed the follow through, right? They U.S. this, that, and the third, right? Welfare reform, however, allowed for states to then become the managers of their individual welfare social programs. So basically, states would get the equivalent of a block grant. That block grant would include things like, let's say, Head Start or housing, Section 8, food stamps, TANF, disability services. So a lot of people don't realize what social programs or the welfare programs that they talk about, what they encompass. So it basically was the federal government said, we'll send this to you all, you manage it, we'll give you global parameters like your poverty thresholds, right? So most social programs follow the national poverty thresholds,
right,
which are problematic because they were established, I want to say, in the 1930s or the 50s, one of the two. And we really have not updated.
They haven't changed?
We haven't updated them at all. So, but states have control of their social programs. So when I hear people saying we're spending too much on welfare and you're in a red state, I laugh because it's known when you become a social worker or you work in that industry, for every dollar a red state sends, they get $2 to $3 back.
Yeah.
Blue states pay for social programs in red states.
Because most of your red states are your most impoverished.
Yep.
They're usually your more impoverished states. Your more rural or
Yeah.
and then everything like you said with social programs, they use propaganda to make it like it's other when it's not. A lot of black people on welfare and SNAP. It's majority white people on welfare. and
I'm
SNAP.
glad you jumped that out there because I want to say this for the folks who will watch this.
Please, and say it to that camera right there.
I want people
directly
to
to them.
think about this. We're watching Elon Musk and Donald Trump take a buzzsaw through the American government, all these agencies right now. People, we've seen estimates of up to 200,000 federal workers potentially losing their job, right? They're cutting waste, right? If welfare was a program that benefited black people exclusively,
Exclusively is the key
Right?
word. Right.
they could have cut it decades ago. They would have cut it decades ago.
Right.
For real.
Absolutely.
Like legit. Here's some numbers I want people to understand when they start, and you can apply this to the DEI conversations too.
Go ahead. Tell them. Look them in the eye when you tell them. Tell them.
In the United States, the largest minority is the Hispanic community. They are at about 64, 65 million, right?
Right.
The black community, we're 14.2%, we're at about 44, 45 million, right?
Right. Right.
The white community in the United States is 219 million people. There is no way that you have the majority of welfare programs serving black people when the white community is 5 times greater.
Exactly. The math ain't mathing, y'all.
It never has.
It never has. But they'll spend media and
that's
use
what they-
propaganda.
That's what they'll say.
I remember seeing when I was younger commercials about. I don't see them now. I saw a commercial, a Snap commercial.
Yeah.
Saying how you can apply. And don't you know they deliberately use, she was a black woman, but going down there to get her Snap and things like that.
Let me tell you, welfare queen, Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan. Yep.
Ronald Reagan.
That's before your time.
Ronald Reagan made the term welfare queen prominent with a lie. That's the thing. It's funny watching. It's almost like a renaissance of previous conservative propaganda nowadays.
Yep. Yep.
Because the things they're talking about now, the things they're doing now,
They were talking about in the 80s.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, they did it before.
Yeah.
And long as you have a little bit of bias or a little bit of bigotry in you, and it's easy to be swept over you. You know what I'm saying? It's so easy to fool the masses.
It's something that I don't really engage with a lot of folks nowadays politically, just because I oftentimes have to gauge whether or not the conversation would be fruitful.
Yeah.
But one thing I would love to do is to sit down and ask the people who embrace Make America Great Again, right? But don't want to be called racist. When was America great?
Yeah.
What period of time was America great for everyone? Because you don't want to be considered racist or a bigot.
Right.
Because remember, the 60s coming into the 70s is your civil rights legislation. That's 100 years after the end of the Civil War, where supposedly black people were free and we were good, right? According to the way some people talk, we're supposed to be good. But 100 years later, we go through Reconstruction, we go through Jim Crow laws, all of that. And the civil rights era was, once again, black people making America live up to its own billing, right? Because think about it, you also had, the great immigrant migration, the early 20th century, right?
Yeah.
So even with all of that, black people still had to make America stand on what it claimed as its greatness, the ability to say that all men are created equal, that, they're not going to discriminate. That was black people leading the way with that. So you've got probably the last major piece of civil rights legislation that came through, the 1968-69 Fair Housing Act. And I want you to think about that. It wasn't until 1969 that the U.S. government said, you know what? You can't discriminate against people trying to purchase a home or rent a home based on their race.
With the redlining?
Not just redlining, the establishment of subdivisions.
Oh, yeah.
Subdivisions were a means of segregation using housing legally. And, the first subdivisions did not allow black
Blacks,
people.
yeah. Even veterans couldn't use the GI Bill who had
Black
honorable district.
vet-
But
black-
black veterans. Let me.
Yes.
Thank you, my brother. Let me paraphrase. Let me rephrase. Black veterans weren't allowed to use the GI Bill who served and who had honorable discharges or disabilities at that. They couldn't. They were denying them. Yeah. So.
Even the term projects, which gets labeled on black people.
Yep.
Projects, the project communities that most people know that are now associated with black economically impoverished areas were a part of workforce housing developments. Cabrini Green in Chicago. There's several in New York City. Remember, at the beginning of the 20th century, we're shifting from the agrarian-based economy to industrial. You had all these people coming in. They need a place to stay. Prior to that, think about the American landscape, especially in the South, was plantations.
Yep.
Slave quarters, and everybody else.
Yeah.
The Northeast was a little bit different because they had more dense populations, more diverse populations. So, the idea that projects was something that was built specifically for black people is propaganda. It was never that.
And see, I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
So who's to say, maybe when they said make America great again, maybe they weren't talking about us. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
maybe he said, maybe not for y'all.
I think for them it encompasses a lot of different things, but we know that it wasn't like great for black people. So,
and I think deep down they know that too.
Yeah,
they know that too.
So
yeah,
but I do want to move on to talk about Trump's first month in office. It has involved Doge, but he signed, more than 70 executive orders. Hitting on the illegal immigration, hitting on a number of different things like the wasteful spending, like we talked about. But, he restored the death penalty. He was, defending women from gender ideology, all of these different executive orders that he kind of put into place. What is your assessment of his first month in office as president?
He is doing what Project 2025 said he would do. If you go read Project 2025, he is doing what Project 2025 said he would do. And it's also, to throw this in there, it's a testament to the divide, if you will, or the weakness of his leadership as the leader of the Republican Party. And the reason why I say that is because he's using executive orders which do not require congressional approval.
Right.
Because he knows that he does not have the power in Congress to get through what he's trying to get through. In actuality, it's showing that his second term is even weaker than his first.
Yeah.
Because if he was, and think about this, the president is the leader of whatever respective party they represent, right? So, Joe Biden was the leader of the Democratic Party, Donald Trump in his first term was the leader of the Republican Party, and so forth and so on. Our government is broken up into three branches for a reason. And what Trump is doing and has been doing in his first month has been trying to circumvent the other two branches to fulfill what the folks who want him in place want to see happen.
Right, I agree. Yeah.
Project 2025, which so few people really read, is 40 to 50 years of what white America has been wanting to do since the civil rights movement. Project 2025 is the answer to how do you reverse 50 years of American social progress. And Donald Trump is the vehicle that they use. For people to believe that Donald Trump is behind these executive orders is insane. Donald Trump is a failed businessman who was born into wealth that allowed him to fail up. Donald Trump doesn't have the wherewithal. I would even say, and this may even sound like I'm praising him, but I'm not. Donald Trump does not even care as much about the issues he's writing these orders on. This is conservative Christian evangelicals. This is the technocrats. This is white nationalism. This is fundamentalism. This is the Federalist Society. These are the people who have wanted somebody like Donald Trump to be in office. Someone who, as long as you make him feel like he's the one doing it, he's important, he'll do whatever. That's who's behind this, in my opinion. You know, and he's doing it. Of course, it's a blitzkrieg. But if you paid attention to what Steve Bannon said, that's how they have to do it.
Right.
It's shock and awe. It's, you know, ram it through. And I think as a society, we're so used to, even when, you know, we would lose as, say, Democrats, we knew the Republicans would be there. We would expect some gloating and, you know, some putting it in our face, but nothing like this. And if you think about it, it's Trump, it's Elon Musk, it's the people who don't even have enough faith in the Republicans to truly be able to do it the right way. You know, and even though in Congress we've got slim margins, that's the other thing. They didn't want to leave it to some Republicans who would defect, as you saw on some of these confirmations.
Oh yeah, on some of the confirmations, there were several people who didn't vote for these people. Yeah. So, what did you think? What did you think about his first? What is your assessment of Trump's first month in office?
Well, remember when he said, to me, this is a form of dictatorship. He said, I want to be a dictator on day one. And like what he said, by using executive orders to skirt around Congress, you know, I heard the video I think we listened to. He doesn't want to work with people. He wants to be a king. Therefore, time life has placed that long live the king of Donald Trump. So when you're a king, you don't have to ask even though the king has a council, right? Yeah. Which he has Elon and everybody else, but you just pretty much what you say is law. You know what I'm saying? And that's kind of what he's doing right now with using executive orders by doing these things. The question is, do I agree with some of the executive orders he does? Yes or no I don't know how y'all feel about it. But then, I don't know, I heard someone said something like, you know, men, they're big on men playing sports with women, you know, trying to, and someone said that's really a small issue. There's no it is a smaller issue. It's very small, right?
But, you know, I think it was, you know, there was a lot of publicity behind it.
Yes, they used it,
so, even Trump had a incident recently with the governor of Maine. I
saw that,
yeah. You know, he was like, we're going to stop the funding for you guys if you guys don't, you know, abide by. He said, we're the law.
No,
we're the law.
Is that constitutional?
So here's the funny thing about that encounter. She used to be an attorney general. So he's arguing with somebody who knows the law.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and he can't. As a matter of fact, there's folks who are saying that a significant percentage of these executive orders are going to be litigated and they're going to be overturned or whatever, because you can't just, like, even as blatantly discriminatory as Republicans can be, they recognize, like, this is not good for the American brand.
Yeah.
Right.
There's even a lot of Republicans I saw over the weekend are kind of like,
because they got to go home.
Yeah, they're trying to cut stuff back, and
Right.
but also like the people, in their states are like mad at them, so they're trying to walk things back now.
Because isn't that the whole purpose why they left Europe, to get from under the rulers of a king?
That's what they said.
That's what they said, right?
But when you study American history, the United States, go back to the 13 original colonies. They were established as economic and financial endeavors for an entity. It's either a trading company, like in the case of New York, the Dutch Trading Company.
Yeah.
In New York was New Amsterdam, or a king or a monarchy, like in the case of South Carolina. So we were taught that they were escaping religious persecution. Not really. So
Yeah. Because they brought religion, to be honest with you, and they were the overseers of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah.
I will say this is his first month in office is unprecedented. I mean, what he's doing. I mean, 70 executive orders, and it seems like they're moving really, really fast. And there's not much thought behind what they're doing. Obviously, that's why there's clashes going on. And I think that ultimately, obviously, there is what they're doing is not right, and they need to take their time, make sure that they're doing things the correct way. But I think for regular people, who kind of don't really follow politics, I don't think they really realize what's happening and what's going on. And so for those people, what would you say to them? Like a lot of people, I feel like there's a lot of people who don't really understand why someone should really focus on other people losing their jobs when maybe they've lost their job recently.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Or, they look at what's going on and they say, okay, well, these people, they have a ton of money. I don't, And so like I feel like a lot of people who don't really understand the impact of what's going on, right now. What would you say to those
I think
folks?
just real quick.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
I think it's remember that old saying, it doesn't bother you until it hits your doorstep. I think a lot and a lot of, I'm just going to say it. I'll just say people who vote for Trump and then turn out, and then the knife ultimately got stuck in their back, and now they're on social media crying and things like that, right? But a lot of people, and they always think it's going to be somebody else. You see what I'm saying? That's what I'm saying. It don't hit until it hits at home, And I think that's just what it is.
Yeah, that's a real interesting question. I always try to answer it in an objective way, but I gotta say the honest way I want to say is, we have to pick what identity we want to be recognized as, because a lot of people who support Trump, a lot of people who consider themselves conservative, also will say, I'm a Christian, I believe in God, I believe in, all of the things.
But do they?
Right.
Really?
Because
That's
the thing
not
about
God.
it is, when you say, why should I care about someone? But I'm like, but you're reading from a book about someone that allegedly gave their life
Exactly
for others
What?
and knew that's what they were doing.
Yeah.
And you're now asking me why you should vote for someone who is going to do the best job at making sure the most people are taken care of? Like, I personally can't reconcile with that. But if I were to tell people, you care because as a civilized society and as a society that has existed for a relatively short amount of time, we cannot afford to be at this stage of selfishness. We like to think, because most of us can only think in the frame of our own lifetimes, right? but in the grand scheme of the world, we're still a baby. And we've gone through a lot. But when we start unraveling what technically should be connecting us, where does that unraveling end? So when people say, well, why should I care if, they're doing this, that, and the third? I'm like, so then what makes the United States the United States? What is separating patriotism from predator-like behavior? It's like the purge.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So if you say you don't care about me, why should I care about you?
Right.
We then devolve into chaos where nothing matters.
Yep.
Nothing. If the benefit of my fellow man or woman is not a concern of mine, then what does this all mean?
Yeah. They only united when it come to a foreign country. Amongst that's the only time.
America's very divided. America's very divided.
Very
so.
Divided. Yeah, if it's another foreign country,
yes.
Like for example, we go way back to Hiroshima and stuff like that in Japan. Or they united amongst, you know what I'm saying? But then even when the soldiers came back, they still treated the black soldiers less than.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's very divided. They only united when it come to another foreign country.
So let me ask this question: when people say we have to stop being so divided, what do you guys say?
When people say, I actually agree with that statement. I do think that we have to stop being so divided, and people need to come together. And I do think that people are being used though as a pawn, and people are being riled up, and people are being, people are taking what people have to say as like scripture. You know what I mean? If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And instead of like doing their own digging, because I think that ultimately what I've noticed as a person who's able to kind of see good on both sides and things that I disagree with on both sides, a lot of what people are talking about is very similar. And it's just about getting in a room and hashing it out and really looking at what's going on. And I think a lot of people don't want to have those tough conversations. People really, the second that they hear, oh, that person's a Trump supporter, oh, that person's a Democrat, their brain shuts down, and they can't get past a label. Instead of, getting past the label, they just completely just shut down. And, I was talking to somebody earlier today and they were like, well, I've lost friends over this. And to me, that's kind of crazy because, I grew up in a time where you could disagree with somebody about that, where they stood politically. You know what I mean? And you could still go about, being friends with them. You know what I mean? But it's gotten to another level. And to me, it's just kind of crazy how people are right now in America. So, yeah, sorry, that was a long.
No. Listen, I'm glad. Yeah. I want to hear that. How about you, Hendrix? I want to hear what you got to say.
Repeat the question. He was
when people
long.
Say, when people say we need to stop being so divided, what's your response to that?
We need to stop being so divided. Stop being so divided. What's my response to that? Well, if I can be brief, because I remember I was born, and I remember the Jimmy Carter. I was born, and I raised up in the Reagan era, right? And then, and so forth, right? And both Bush. I remember there was a time when you had people, some people were back from the 80s, late 70s, you was Republican, you was Democrat, but they didn't necessarily look at a Republican as a racist, even though they may have some, you know what I'm saying? Now, for some odd reason, with this new administration, a Republican is almost looked at as a straight up racist. So when they say that, we are divided, how can we come back together? It's hard, man. And I think the only way you can come back together But no, I can't even say that, man, because it's a lack of education on. I can almost say on both parts, but definitely on the majority, the Southern whites, and as people be scared to say what it is. I'm gonna just be honest with you. It is what it is. You know, it's a lack of a maturity and a level to understand. And half of them don't even interact with another black person to really know their walks. And like what you said, once they do that, they'll realize, like, dude, we want the same things. We want to take care of our family. We want to eat. We want to work. We want to be left alone. We want to worship in peace. A lot of them want the same thing, you know. But the thing is, will they sit down and, you know, like I know I'm sounding long-winded too. To me, one of the dumbest questions, and I always say there's no dumb question. To me, one of the dumbest questions you can ask is, how do we end racism? You know why that's stupid? Because nobody is born a racist. Deep down, we know how to end it. Deep down, give this person who don't look like you the benefit of a doubt. Treat them like you would treat yourself, like they are somebody. But being through biases and stereotypes and bigotry, a lot of people won't do that because they rather be more faithful. Oh, no, you know, oh, he black because I heard, and you big too. So, I mean, you look like a dangerous fella. But they don't know you might own a nursery and do flowers. They don't know that from a can of paint. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. Like D.L. Hughley said, one of the worst places for black people to live is in the minds of white people. The way they don't see us the way we see ourselves, especially the bigger you are.
So, listen, I appreciate both of your answers because I asked that question because that's a question that consistently gets asked during times of racial strife, right? And it's always attached in political context, right? So my answer is this. We will stop being divided when we figure out and embrace what truly unites us. We make the assumption that we're all one. We make the assumption that because we're born here, that we live and occupy the same spaces, that we agree, right? I'll even go as far as to put on the bad guy hat. The issue is not that people don't want to have hard conversations. It's that white people have avoided those hard conversations.
Facts.
There's never been a black political power structure in the United States. There's never, with the exception of the time that Barack Obama became president, not been a white landed male being the president of the United States. There's only been 3 black governors in the history of the United States. Political power, economic power, social and cultural power rests heavily in white communities. So for me, the issue is those who have power, are they willing to concede it for the greater good? Like when people talk about racism, right? And I see folks like to say, well, black and white people need to come together to stand up against the rich and powerful, right? I always go back to, well, go look at civil rights photographs, right? Go look at Selma. Go look at Birmingham. Go look at Montgomery. Go look at Richmond. Go look at Raleigh. And when you look at those black and white pictures, right, point out how many millionaires were in those pictures at that time. The people who were enacting the violence against black people were oftentimes in the same socioeconomic bracket as black people. So it's not that somebody's playing us. We have to look internally. And in this instance, white people have to look internally to ask themselves the question, what is it that they have that prevents them from saying, you know what? Not just black people, every other ethnic or racial minority. Why is it that we feel the need to not just, in some cases, hate them or enact violence, but to codify that violence? It's not just that they don't like us, they make laws. When you make laws that say where people can live, where people can go to school, where people can enjoy what should be public amenities, that's not that's not just, oh, I don't like you.
Yeah.
That's something deeper.
Right.
You know, when we start talking about the situation with trans, do you know the percentage of trans people in America right now? 1.6.
It's real low. Yeah.
So you can't tell me, why would I as a trans person want to sit down with somebody who is committed to not just hating me, but promoting a lie even after I present them with evidence that it's a lie? So we have to become honest that we were never truly united. We just existed together.
Right. Yeah. We were emancipated, weren't we?
That's what they said, except for the 19th Amendment.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point. For somebody, because for me, I know I've kind of lived on the West Coast. I've lived in the East Coast, North, and I've lived here in the South. And so I've seen all different types of cultures. I've seen all different types of people. And for me, I always look at the fact that sitting down with somebody is kind of a way for you to kind of show them who you are.
Right.
And specifically like breaking bread with them, right?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I think if there was a way to kind of bring people and put them in the same room, they would see that people are different in that way.
Let me tell you.
Because, I have my friends here in the South. I mean, just by like some of the things, and it has nothing to do with race, right? It could just be like cultural things. Like some of the things I've heard them say, like, oh, these people do this, or that, that person might do this or that. But it's like, yeah, but you've never like met them. You don't know how they are in real life, Yeah. Like, but I've met them, so I know, like, what they're saying might be a little bit different, whether it's black, white, whatever,
Stereotypes.
Yeah, exactly, the stereotypes. So, yeah.
You know where the place that I think, and sadly it's under attack, where what you're talking about is taking place and has been? Schools. And that's why I go so hard on why people need to and should have been paying attention to what's been going on in schools, because my partner's a 20 plus year veteran teacher, kindergarten, right? But she also does early childhood education. She's an instructor. Kids come into a classroom and they see differences, right? They see you're brown, I'm not brown, I may be pink. But in that classroom environment, if they have the right teacher, those things don't become barriers, right? And that's what public education does, right? It gives each of us the opportunity to grow intellectually and to see differences not as bad things, but just as things, right? But again, this is where the majority has an issue. The attacks on public education, the fact that there are people who said diversity, equity, and inclusion were bad, that should have raised everybody's eyebrows.
Yeah.
Like, how do you say those things are bad?
Right.
How do you tell a school that has kids who are of all different nationalities, all different religious backgrounds or not, all different gender identities, whatever, that's bad? Because here's the thing: the language in the bills that eventually became law said to not make children feel a certain way, but a lot of them originally had white children. And the people who have been speaking out about them have said that. And that's where I'm like, that's why we keep moving back.
What are your thoughts overall on DEI? Do you think that it's like a good thing? Because a lot of people have criticized it and said that, it was something that was supposed to be mainly, they felt like, for people of color.
Yeah,
and
that's what they thought.
a lot of the DEI helped out people who, were like white women
Yeah.
specifically.
That's who mainly benefits
so
from DEI.
what do you say to those kind of people?
So first, DEI is just the latest iteration of affirmative action,
Okay.
right? It is what we frame attempting to come together as, right? Most people have very little understanding of what DEI truly is. They don't know. It's been attached to race, it's been attached to ethnicity. But DEI is basically a framework for us to have a society that does exactly what you said earlier. People who can see others who may be different, not as enemies, but as I don't even want to say friends, but as just humans. Right? That's what DEI at its core is. DEI is making sure that this building has a handicap accessible ramp. DEI is making sure that we have male and female bathrooms. DEI is looking at, let's say, the student population and seeing that, oh, we have a huge number of white students. Well, do other students want to come? What's causing them? Because we know they exist. That's what DEI does. It is not something that is exclusionary or excludes others. And I think, once again, this is an example of how the people who don't want DEI to work, misconstrue it. To manipulate people.
There's a lot of people who want the DEI, but they felt like it wasn't really benefiting
and
their community.
So
go ahead.
That's where what I said earlier. Who's making the determination of what DEI is and who gets it? Yeah. That's where I said, who's in power? Yeah. Who makes the ultimate decision? 2020, when we had the summer of social justice protests, and all these corporations said, we're going to make a commitment to the black community. First thing I said is, what does a commitment look like?
Anything DEI or anything social related, they always propaganda to black people. You can't really say so much Hispanic because Hispanic just came over here not but so many odd years ago, right? So everything is always geared towards black people. I saw a video with DEI, an all-white school in Kentucky, function off of DEI inclusion, and she said, I voted for Donald Trump. I saw
the same video.
But I didn't think it would affect us.
Rural white communities, Appalachia.
Yes.
They're some of the biggest recipients
of federal
funds and DEI programs.
And now he's cutting the funding. I'm going to put it back into the states. And now she's saying, these kids, we can't even give them breakfast. I'll have to lay off teachers. That's how we pay their salary. Even the principal, like he said, Kentucky, all white, strict benefit off of DEI, but that's the problem. Because of propaganda and race, a lot of white people will vote against their interests to uphold white supremacy. Yeah, that's pretty much what it is, bar none.
That's until that, in my opinion, gets addressed. Because I think something that happens when, like you said, people are saying the communities who should have benefited from DEI didn't. It's because who was responsible for making sure. And until that happens, like, people are not going to want to sit down because it's a trust issue. If you've abused me, if I've sat down with you and you've hit me in my face 5 times, right? On the 6th time, right, you are like, you know what? I don't want to hit you no more, AJ. Just sit down. Let's talk. What brings me to sitting down with you when 5 times previously you've hit me?
Right.
It's like Charlie Brown with Lucy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because we just don't, as much as they try to do diversity, equity, inclusion, it just, for some odd reason, it doesn't trickle down to us like they think. Even in the government contract spectrum, right? Now, these are numbers. Now, they might have changed a little bit, but they say that the blacks still only got like roughly around 3% of the government contract. Yeah. And that's supposed to be diversity, equity, and inclusion. Only 3%. Black women had like a 0.1% of government. So all that go to white men and then white women. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? But it's once
those
again,
are
it's
the people who benefited.
Exactly. It's the propaganda. So my thing is this. I ask y'all this question. So if they do away with diversity, equity, inclusion, are the white women and the white men losing as much, or are they just still going to eat as is? Or maybe white women losing out now.
So
what's that going to look like?
Yeah, say that
I'm
again.
asking. So if they want to do away with DEI, right, because it's benefit white women more so, and then white men, obviously it's still going to benefit white men because they saying as a whole, they trying to, with Project 2025, they trying to go back to a white male dominant society, right?
Yeah.
So will that no longer benefit white? Would they discriminate against white women? Because we always been discriminating against black.
Well, they're getting rid of the program.
Yeah.
So
you think
the
white women
programs,
would they decline? Their numbers decline, and you think that will
I mean, I
affect
don't know.
them?
I don't know.
So,
But
so to answer your question, it's not a sustainable model because any society that is progressive and that has a chance to really advance has to have DEI. They may not call it that, but you have to have diversity in your workforce. You have to have
exactly
those things. So I think what they're doing, they're doing a lot of posturing, right? They're saying, "Oh, we're going to cut this," and of course, the people, like you said, who are thinking, "Oh, well, that's going to hurt those people,"
Right.
they're not realizing, and this is where a term I like to use, weaponized ignorance, comes into play, because people. There's two forms of ignorance, in my opinion. There is ignorance by circumstance, meaning you just in a place where you just don't know and have never had to know. And there's ignorance by choice, where you have the opportunity to get information, you just choose not to. There are people who fall into the category of ignorant by choice, and they're now having to learn a hard lesson. So I don't think that the idea that they're removing DEI is going to really take, because one, it's affecting households.
Oh,
That economics impacts a lot in our country, and when you have individuals who now have to take economic cuts to their lifestyles or whatever, that's not sustainable.
cash rules. What was the most successful? What was the most successful boycott?
Montgomery,
The bus boycott.
yeah.
Yeah, out of all. You know why? Because they start messing with the white people money.
yeah,
You can march and sing all day long. They don't care nothing about that.
Yep.
They can care less.
and there's
You
a
mess with the
boycott
money.
coming up, right?
Yeah,
On the
28th.
28th.
Yeah.
Where you don't buy. You know about that, right? Don't buy anything.
Yeah.
No.
That's what they're telling everybody to do, right? What do you think about that?
So I'm gonna be the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna touch on what he said.
Okay.
I hear boycotts. I feel in the 21st century though, they're not necessarily a sustainable model of change. And here's why. Previously, the economic infrastructure in our society, meaning how much people made, how much it took to live, was a lot different. Proximity. Also, you could boycott the store in your town because it was the only stores, and you were their only source of revenue.
Yeah.
Same thing with the bus line. Now, through diversity, global corporatization, it makes it hard to truly have an effective boycott that impacts the way a Montgomery bus boycott or a hospital strike did.
Yeah.
What I would like to see, though, is, I don't think you can ever stop people from boycotting, and I'm not advocating for that. What I would like to see, though, is the same energy that gets put into a bus boycott gets put into a mobilization effort for political engagement. If we can advertise about doing a national level boycott, can we not do national engagement about elections? Because we're talking about, like, with a boycott, who's the target? Is it the corporations? Great. That's your free market. But when we talk about a lot of the stuff that's going on, from the laws and the policies, those are politicians. What are we doing to affect change for them?
Right. Well, I think that's a good point. Let me touch on this because you've talked a lot about like the engagement of the voters, right? And I think that I know for specifically what I've seen from the black community is, for instance, like with Kamala, they felt like they showed up, for Kamala. And what did they get? They still got Trump. Yeah. And so I've seen a lot of people talk about how they're almost going to pull back now because of something like that happening.
Yeah.
I mean, what would you say to people who like feel like, yo, I voted for her.
Like it don't
I
matter.
did my job. Like I went out there, I voted, I campaigned, I let people know, like I got people to the polls. I went out there, I did all these things, yet we got the same result, that we got 8 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
That's a very good point, and it's something that I'm seeing on social media as well. And I would say to folks, take your time, right? I'm not going to tell you not to feel that way because it is a very real thing, right? Especially for the Black community. And remember, our numbers, we're 14% of the population. But if you look at the exit returns in the last presidential election, 92% of Black women and 80% of Black men. So we did do our part.
Yeah.
But what I feel like, and this is something that I will always say, we have to, in the Black community, we have to understand political strategy. It is more than going into the booth and voting for a name, right, during the presidential elections. I said last year, in addition to voting for Kamala, we needed to make sure that we sent a Congress that could work with her. And that's every presidential election cycle and every midterm. And I always tell people there's an election going on almost every year. 2-4-6 is my mantra. There's every election, there's every 2, 4, and 6 years, right? So next year, 2026 is midterm, right? Midterm is where you can stop everything that Trump is doing right now. If you get a Congress and you get state level representation that is willing to fight. One of his executive orders got shot down, and I heard that on the way up, because 19 blue state attorneys generals filed a lawsuit that a judge came back and said, it was the Elon Musk and Doge having access to sensitive paid information from the Treasury.
Right.
19 blue state attorney generals filed it. A judge gave an emergency injunction. That's how you start to make change. It's not just, okay, can we get the presidency? We as Black people, and we're at a disadvantage regardless though, but we have to understand where we can get our own leg up. Local politics, I always tell folks, is the way to go. You have to look at what your local landscape is, move up to your state, and then things will become a little bit better on the national level. I said, but it definitely feel upset. And I tell people like this, if you're a Democratic voter, hold the Democratic Party accountable. My gripe with the Democratic Party is this: they do not invest in red states. They do not invest in red states in the South. And as a Black voter, that is something that has been allowed to go on for far too long. There are 10 states in the United States that have a total Black population percentage of 20% or higher. 8 of them are in the South. 8. Georgia, Louisiana, and Mississippi, as well as, is it Maryland? I think it's Maryland. It may be off. Don't quote me. They have a Black population of at least 30%. Why is that significant? That's the percentage of the total population. That's power, right? But things like gerrymandering and, like we say, propaganda, making people think that they don't have power, oftentimes is what separates a Maryland, which has one of your richest counties for Black people in America, from Mississippi, which has some of your poorest counties for anybody in America.
Yeah. Man, if they do that, they can probably swing some of them red states.
What are swing states? Do y'all know?
What do you mean?
What is a swing? What makes a state a swing?
Georgia became a swing state.
I mean, sometimes, I mean, like, I think it means, right? Like, if you can go either way.
I mean, on the surface, yeah.
But I think it's mainly just you've elected both parties.
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
So no, he's right.
Yeah.
I used to frustrate me because I'm like, why is all this attention on swing states and what makes a state a swing state? And it's basically a state that has at the local level, right?
Mhm.
At the local level, the power structure is not dominated, like they don't have a trifecta. Trifecta is one party controls all branches, the executive branch in both chambers, right? So what happens is certain states don't have that, and so you can't count their electoral votes for one candidate or the other. You usually have to go through. That's something, if we want to really start a political movement, we have to start eliminating the idea of swing states. We have to make every state competitive, right? We have to make every state competitive because when you have states that either party says, hey, this state, conservatives, Republicans don't do this. Conservatives go after every state. They legit want it. If you look at previous maps of presidential elections, you'll see we've been close in the modern era, but there have been elections where a Democratic candidate only won one state. In was it 1980? No, 84, I think. Walter Mondale won one state, Minnesota. One state out of all the electoral college votes went to Ronald Reagan. Wow. So it's possible. But I think what has to happen is we have to recognize when the political parties are not even engaging in the necessary actions. And that's why I say we as voters have to take responsibility and accountability for our role. People show up in presidential elections because that's what the media focuses on. They have all the backstories. They get the media airtime. It's during your midterms and the down ballot races during the presidential years that you make the difference.
Okay.
So 2022, when we had midterms, that was halfway through Joe Biden's term. We also elected our governor, right? South Carolina has 3.3 million voters. Our state population is 5 million, right? A little over 5 million. Henry McMaster won a second term with 85,000 votes. The percentage turnout in the midterm election in 2022 for the state of South Carolina was 17%.
Yeah. They don't turn off for that.
So now I have to ask people, I'm like, if you're wanting somebody to do something for you, right, that requires your participation and you don't participate, what do you think that's going to make them want to do?
Why should someone participate? Why can you give them a good argument to why they should participate? Yeah. Because I feel like a lot of people feel like, not me, obviously. I vote all the time.
Yeah.
But like a lot of people feel like, nothing is happening. Their vote doesn't really matter. They showed up for Kamala. They showed up for all these different people. I mean, just looking at myself, like I showed up here in South Carolina multiple times for a losing party. And it's like, why should we continue to do this if it feels like nobody else is like kind of putting in their part? Nobody's doing their part. And then you look at Washington and you see these people again. A lot of them are in the Democratic Party too. Like they go home to their mansions. They don't really care. They're not really doing anything. What do you say to those people?
So first, let me say this. There's a level of maturity, intellectual and political maturity we have to have, right? When you say you showed up for people, you showed up for presidential elections. Did you show up for gubernatorial elections? Did you show up for city council? And I'm talking about people as a whole.
Yeah, what if somebody did show up for all of those things?
You have to always show up. It's like this. Okay. I'll put it like this. As human beings, we don't oftentimes walk on our first try. Sometimes we don't get our driver's license on our first try. You don't pass the bar on your first try. I have to push back on people who say, well, I showed up. You showed up in a booth and you pushed a button, right? But do you also make sure that you're knowledgeable or you understand where to get information about what that person is supposed to do? Politics is a little bit different than what we oftentimes do in life because, again, they don't want us to understand. And by they, I mean the people who really want to control politics. They don't want us to understand. That's why I try to do what I do, because I know we don't know. The less empowered people feel, the more the people who are doing the things that make us feel like it doesn't matter are going to win.
Yeah.
If us showing up and voting didn't matter, there would not be so many voter suppression efforts, even with the numbers I just gave you, right? So it's like you already don't have people showing up. They don't want any.
When turnout's low, they win.
Yeah,
So,
and they don't want anybody. I just saw interview with a state rep in Kansas where they're literally trying to take away early voting and all of the voting processes that allow for people who can't get out of their house or whatever.
And these are Republicans, right?
Yeah. So for the people who say, it doesn't matter, I would say, let's talk, right? Mm-hmm. Let's talk. Find the people who know more than you and let them help you walk through. I'm not throwing people under the bus, but it's like, I use a sports analogy, right? There are people who say I showed up and my person didn't win. I'm like, you got Dallas Cowboys fans who haven't won since the 90s, but they still Dallas Cowboys fans. You haven't stopped being a fan.
That guy
we
right
won
there.
sooner than you guys did. So, okay.
We talking about?
But anyways.
Y'all won right after us.
Yeah, I know.
Last one.
We've won a championship
first.
Yeah.
But that's my point. So it's like,
y'all been waiting longer. That's what I'm trying to say. Go ahead.
Right. But that's what I tell folks. I'm like, and the difference with politics though, unlike, sports, is you have more control than you think.
Okay.
I think that's the thing that people need help with. Okay. Understanding that, you can go the 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, that's great. That's what they push. But city council is great. Yeah. Like your individual lives, city council, your state house reps, those are winnable. They're literally winnable. And getting people to see those victories, that low-hanging fruit there, I think will help them understand the larger context better.
Because that'll help them, that'll affect them on a day-to-day basis.
But it's been years, right?
Yeah.
It's been years. Like, how much more can people take?
So can I say
for the people who do show up?
Oh, no.
Because I met a lot of them.
Yeah,
I met a lot of them. I went out on the trail. I talked to a lot of people.
I got a question for him real quick because he brought up a point about voter suppression. You saw a lot of that on the Republican side, right?
Right.
All you hear was Democrat, go out and vote like your life depended on it, right?
Right.
Then you would hear about these certain tactics that Republicans would use.
Yeah.
And then they were trying to tell Biden, remove the filibuster so we can get things, but he won't do anything, right?
Right.
So what do you say about, and Republicans, one thing you got to take your hats off to them. They use undermine anything they can do. But Democrats won't do nothing. What do you think Democrats
when they have
need
the
to do?
power too, right?
That's what I'm saying.
When they did have
Democrats
the power.
have the power, and they
Not
won't
that I
do
would have
nothing.
agreed with a filibuster, but they had the power.
They had the
to do
power
it,
to
and they
get
did
things
nothing.
passed.
So this is where all three of us have the same mentality, and what it boils down to is this: on a national level, right? On a national level, remember, and you alluded to this when you said about having friends in other places, right? Democrats are truly a diverse party, right? So they're a big tent party. So a Democrat from North Carolina is different than a Democrat from South Carolina. A Democrat in Chicago may not be a Democrat the same as a Democrat in New Mexico, right? So that's one thing. And then the other thing is Democrats historically have been, or at least since the party switch, have been, they try to identify under this banner of integrity. So, and that trips a lot of them up, like you said. Like one of the things that was always frustrating with the Senate, the U.S. Senate, yes, at one point Democrats had a majority, but we really didn't. people like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema weren't Democrats.
Yeah,
But that gets to the people that you don't really want us to go after, right? Nancy Pelosi. She has the power to put these people in these states, okay? And she chose
I want you
those
to go.
people.
I want you to go after Nancy,
Okay.
because Nancy Pelosi has been in Congress.
I know.
Since 1987.
Yeah.
But she had the power to put these people in. She chooses
even with
the candidates.
Sinema and Schumer, right? As you said,
Manchin,
Joe Manchin,
West Virginia,
and Joe Manchin, West Virginia, and Sinema in
Arizona.
Even Biden wouldn't call them out. He said, "We trying to do things," and they
Exactly.
voted. But let that have been Trump.
So now
Trump would have put them on blast big time.
Trump would have called them out.
But-
And the thing is that it's like you had those states, right? But she puts the money behind them. That's how they get put into the positions that they're put into. It's like, to me, that speaks to a problem at the head of the party.
And you know what it is? It helps keep her in a certain position.
And people wonder why they lost.
And
And
it keeps her in a certain
like,
position.
So here's the thing. Let me ask this question. So we now talk about MAGA, right? Everybody's like, MAGA. And for me, I smile because MAGA is the manifestation. Well, that, but they're the realization or the progress of the Tea Party, right?
Yeah.
So
right, yeah.
when Barack Obama got elected, the Tea Party, I kept telling people like, it's the Tea Party. I said, they're Republicans. They're the wing of the Republican Party that's going to do what traditional establishment Republicans feel like they can't do. Yeah. So I oftentimes challenge Democrats, I said, why don't you? Tea Partiers and MAGA pushed the Republican Party in the direction it's in now. There is, on the voter side, like, there needs to be a similar movement in the Democratic Party.
Yes.
I will use South Carolina, for example.
All I'm saying.
Do you know who the chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party is right now?
It's not Clyburn?
No.
No, it's not. And that's my issue.
He's the majority. He's the whip.
He's not even the chair. I'm talking about of the party. You have a separate party chair. You have leadership outside of elected officials, right?
Oh, okay.
So your Charleston County Democratic chair is Sam Scardin, right?
Dang, you never hear about him.
I never heard of it. Yeah.
Is he white?
Yeah. Your state party chair
Never hear about him.
is Crystal Spain.
You never hear about her neither.
So but now let me ask that. After I say your leadership structure, I'm gonna ask another question. So you've got the bulk of your leadership structure for South Carolina Dems is women. Colleen Condon is your first vice chair.
I heard of her.
Yeah,
Colleen Condon.
she's your first vice chair for the state Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Now, here's my question. You say you hadn't heard of her. Are you signed up to get like the emails? Have you participated?
I heard of Condon.
Right. And this is where, and somebody brought this up, and I couldn't agree more. Sometimes we have to say, when we don't know something, we have to own why. People talk about the Congressional Black Caucus and what they're not doing and how they're not doing things for black people, right?
I'm guilty of that.
Go to their YouTube channel.
I'm guilty.
You know how many subscribers they got? The Congressional Black Caucus. You know how many subscribers they got?
How many you got?
1,500. Not 1,000. 1,500.
We almost got more than them. We blacks.
Right.
We do have more than them.
Right. So now when people are like, well, they're not doing anything for, how would you know?
You know something, man? You know that's fair.
Yeah.
I need to do better.
We all do.
Yeah. I can admit that. I need to do better because I was guilty of, man, what does the Black Caucus do? What are they doing? You know what I'm saying? So I need to do better and be more in tune with what these people are doing and you know what I'm saying?
And then let me say this, and I want to be honest because you bring up, how people feel. I think it's legitimate. And if there's ever been a time where true grassroots organic organizing should be being done to shift, it's now. And I'm going to say this, and I don't know how you're going to feel about it.
No, go ahead.
I think we also need to get out of this habit of trying to find a political messiah.
I agree.
People were like, when Barack Obama came, it was a breath of fresh air, and I get it.
Yeah.
Then people have been looking for the second hit. They've been looking for that.
Exactly.
They've been trying to chase that dragon.
But I also think that it's partly because that's all they push out. They need to stop push. I mean, listen, Obama's great, right? Obama's amazing, right?
Right.
But we don't need to see him every time it's time to vote. I'm sorry. They keep pushing him out there, and the last few times they've lost, and they've lost big time.
That's a marketing ploy.
It's like, I know, but
a political
stop putting him out there.
So let me ask you this.
We say we don't want that Messiah, right?
Yeah.
But we keep bringing the same Messiah like he can do something. He can't really do anything. He can't run another term. So why do we keep pushing out the same people to get us to get out and vote for whoever it is? Well, it doesn't matter. Midterms, whatever.
From my understanding, which Biden should have been stepped down, because even though like you said, they feel like they went out for Kamala.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But technically, she didn't even have really enough time. It was miraculous what she did in that short period of time.
Yeah.
Let's just say that, hats off to the sister, And they were saying that Obama was quiet, because he is considered like the pinnacle of the Democratic Party.
But they need to
with
stop
no
pushing him out
blemishes
there.
and nothing like that. So they wanted his endorsement, and that's how. I think not necessarily how Biden got in, because Clyburn got behind Biden, and that's how Biden ended up. You know what I'm saying? But Obama didn't endorse Biden as well. But they look at Obama as the pinnacle
and
of
Obama,
the Democratic Party.
A lot of people have brought it up. Obama kind of hurt her in a way by coming out and said what he said about the black men.
So
I've heard multiple people, including Stephen A., talk about that.
So now I got to put on the
ahead.
bad guy hat again.
Go for it. Go
people
for
feel
it.
about
This is
Stephen
what
A.
we want. This is what the people want.
So here's the thing about, first of all, I think there's a point, and I got to say this because now I'm going to be about black men. Black men have been the weakest link in politics for the last 10 years as a voting bloc. Here's why. 2018, Georgia. Brian Kemp ran for governor. He was Secretary of State. He engaged in some shady dealings, purging the voter rolls. He ran against Stacey Abrams, right?
Right.
Stacey Abrams lost. Right? She licked her wounds and then began one of the biggest statewide organizing campaigns, which resulted in the Dems winning 2 Southern Senate seats. 2. Ran again. She ran again for governor. Who was her biggest detractors?
Black men?
Killer Mike and Charlemagne the God. They did the same thing they did with Kamala Harris.
What'd they do?
Killer Mike was like, well, what are you going to do for black men? While she's running a campaign where she had said, I am trying to make sure Georgia is a state that's safe for black men. Mind you now, she ran after Ahmaud Arbery, if I'm not mistaken. And what happened with Breonna Taylor. Stacey Abrams had organized young black political grassroots organizations. Killer Mike said that after being on Bernie Sanders' nuts for I don't know how long, right?
When he wasn't trying to do anything for black people. Go ahead.
Right?
Yeah.
Then he was in a picture with Brian Kemp, where Brian Kemp and his wife wouldn't even stand right next to him. And then you got Charlemagne doing whatever. Charlemagne always, to me, plays double agent.
Okay.
Because
speak on it.
He is viewed as some voice of the black community politically, but he's not. He asked the same tired questions. Why would you ask a black candidate specifically, repeatedly, in a state that has shown itself to be racist, repeatedly, what specifically are they going to do for black people and not expect the backlash to come from that? This is why I say a lot of the people who have political opinions are politically ignorant. That's the issue. It wasn't that what Obama said was wrong, because guess what? If Obama pulled up the numbers for turnout, which I can guarantee you he had, he's not wrong. He is not wrong. Look at what was the concern during the presidential election this past term. What did you hear black men asking about? Not, what are you specifically going to do for the economy? How are you going to address things in communities, infrastructure? Child support.
That was the big thing.
That was one of the things that was covered in national media.
Is that because Kamala being a prosecutor
It was,
reference
and
of
I'm gonna
that?
say this it was because the people saying it were politically ignorant. States govern child support laws.
Yeah.
Most
not on a
people
federal
are
level.
politically ignorant.
A lot of them.
Yeah.
There are very few people who are as educated or as you are on this subject. And you may think that you're like an infant in this realm, right? But like you just talking, I can just tell that you know way more than
You know almost as much
most
as me.
people. Most people know.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people who aren't. I don't care if you're black, white,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Nobody really knows that much about politics.
I'm glad you said that.
But what happened was when Obama came out there and said what he said, a lot of black men, including
some type of way.
educated black men like a Stephen A., felt like he was talking down to the black men. And so
Stephen A. also said
Okay.
he had a critique of Venus Williams' halftime performance
Oh, her crip walking?
with her crip walking as a non-married man, right?
Okay.
And I think Stephen A's, he's another one who I feel he tries to walk a line. I don't take Stephen A's political positions or even his positions as a black man serious, because I feel like
It's entertainment? You think so?
it's entertainment, and Stephen A. is one of those black men that, I mean, he makes millions of dollars working for a corporation that has a very, very suspicious track record regarding race.
Yes,
Right.
man.
Yeah. And he has very rarely, in my opinion, really been that person that's like stand up. You know, and when I heard what he said, I found it to be hypocritical, because I'm like, Stephen A.'s career has been talking down to black men just because they're athletes. I'm like, yeah.
But I mean, not even him. There are other people who felt that way
I know.
about what Obama was saying. And I think that ultimately what I'm trying to get with what I'm trying to say here is that, like, I think that in order to get rid of the Messiah complex, you have to stop putting out the previous Messiah. And I think the Democratic Party is just hitting the nail on the head every single time when it's time to vote. You see it in the midterms. You see it in, when it's time to vote for the presidential election. And the thing is that, I think that the Republican Party is going to have the same problem once Trump is out of there, okay? Yeah. And the Democrats really need to bring up new people who actually have something to say, and they need to get behind. They need to, people like Nancy Pelosi has to start putting the power behind these people that people want. A populist candidate, like an AOC.
I get what you said.
Like some of these other people.
Three
Go ahead.
points. The first point, Stephen A. said, I don't know if it's true or not, something about running for president maybe in 20, whatever. I don't know how true that is, right?
Yeah.
And then the second thing, what you said about a Messiah, I agree, right? I agree with you saying. I think in this day and age, we don't need a Messiah, a person.
Yeah,
right?
that was his point.
But did you say we need one?
Yeah. No, I didn't say.
He was saying
people have this Messiah complex.
they have the Messiah complex,
But then
which
at
I
the
agree
same
with.
time, right?
That's
True.
That's a problem.
That's true.
Especially
but
in the Democratic Party.
You notice white people never have that, right? Gandhi was like a Messiah type figure person, right? Usually when you have a Messiah type figure, it's usually the people who are oppressed, who is going to uplift us out of this? You know what I'm saying? When the Most High is the one who can do
White
that.
people do have it though.
Who is the
It's
Messiah?
Trump.
Well, yeah. I take that
Before
back.
that, it was
Reagan.
Reagan. Yes. Tell him.
But
That's-
overall, right?
Yeah,
But
go
then at
ahead.
the same time, our ones are the only ones that are getting killed.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? Our ones are the only ones getting shot down.
What do you mean?
So
With
here's,
Malcolm X, Martin
Oh,
Luther
I see what
King.
you're saying. Okay.
so
Go
so
ahead.
let me say this about the Messiah conversation and the point you made. Here's the thing I want to also boil down for folks about politics. Politics is complex but also simple. So they bring out an Obama because people know name recognition matters. Brand recognition matters,
And that's
right?
what it is, yeah.
So, yes, Obama is somebody that for the Democratic Party, they fumbled Obama's 2 terms. Why? Because when Obama energized the younger voting demographic, the Democratic Party, not him, the Democratic Party didn't say, you know what? Let's go with that. Instead, the Democratic Party during the Obama years tried to pivot to moderate white voters.
Yeah.
Because the same thing that was being said after Kamala's loss was, oh, well, working class folks want to know. That was bullshit. Sorry.
No, go for it.
No, say
That was bullshit. That was
I didn't
them
know you
trying
cursed.
to deny the reality. So they brought Obama out because on their bench, he's been the one star that they've had in the last 15, 20 years. But also, we have to acknowledge that it's not that the Democrats don't have, and yes, Schumer and Pelosi definitely have expired, right? But they're not the only ones. The issue, though, is voters. As voters, we, again, have to take accountability for who we support. There are Democratic leaders, there are Democratic rising stars that are out there. It's not just, people look at AOC and I'm like, but she's in New York, the market. Jasmine Crockett, Ayanna Pressley, Matthew Frost, they're all up and coming stars.
You know who they think going to be the up and coming for to take the Democratic Party to the next level? I guess post MAGA, they think it's going to be Shapiro and Whitmer.
Yeah. And
that's
but
what it's gonna
the
be.
problem with the Democratic Party as a whole, and this is where voters have to come in, is they're still trying to center whiteness.
True.
The Democratic Party, in my opinion, has tried to be Republican light for so long that it trips over its own self. But that's where we, in these conversations that we need to have, we need to push the party. And you push the party by pushing the vote. The largest voting demographic that is not present during elections is 19 to 25. That's the largest voting demographic.
Yeah.
I think if they go back and do what Obama did, like you said, you know, the younger voters he was able to grab, right? And they said Bernie couldn't get them. That's why they swayed with Hillary. Obama even went and got the Hispanics, and they showed up in droves for Trump. And I remember he was talking to, because, you know, he had a lot of celebrities endorsing him, which is always good, you know. But then I remember seeing where he talked to Chris Rock. He had a meeting with all of them. So he told Chris Rock, hey, man, you need to, can you get George Lopez? Can you get George Lopez? So he's like, all right, I'll see if I can get him. And then George Lopez, does he talk to George Lopez? He's like, why does he want to keep, why do you want to see me? He said, man, because you the king of the Mexicans. You are, in America, they're, I guess, quote unquote, Messiah or whatever. Or you were the known, you know.
Yeah.
And he even went as far as that. But I do think you made a good point too. Maybe if they go to some of these red states in the South and try to swing some of them, you know, and let them know, hey, I'm human too. I see y'all. I hear y'all.
Democrats as an establishment party, and we have to understand that just like in the Republicans seem more like they're in lockstep because they tend to vote more. Republicans have manifested this pseudo unity around that. So more often than not, you'll see them come together. Democrats still are of, well, I'm going to stand on whatever principle, but the problem is that establishment Democrats like Pelosi, like Schumer, hell, our own Congressman Clyburn, you don't see them invest in the infrastructure of development
Yeah.
in states like this. And you know who else? And I'm going to call their name that I feel wasted their opportunity.
Call him out.
Jamie Harrison.
Oh.
Then he ran for things.
Jamie Harrison ran against Lindsey Graham,
Graham.
but he was also the DNC chair from right here in Orangeburg.
I voted for him.
How is it that you are in a state where you, like you said, the dirt road analogy was your thing, your campaign thing, right? Mm-hmm. So you know South Carolina's full of that. Mm-hmm. Why did you not make South Carolina a priority?
But they did though.
No, he didn't.
They put a ton of. Oh, go ahead.
In down ballot races, I'm not talking about his race.
Okay.
South Carolina down ballot races.
Okay.
Did you develop? Because you got to understand, Republicans have an infrastructure.
Yeah.
What infrastructure did the Dems put in place when Harrison was the chair to help? You know how many people I know that ran for office that ran out of their pocket? Like, to even get, like, that's the other side. The internal politics of politics is what a lot of people don't understand. Like, how is it that people are able to run? There's filing fees, there's infrastructure, there's marketing and communications. Dems, in my opinion, struggle with winning races because they don't have the infrastructure in place. And if you're somebody that they feel is too progressive or too radical, they don't support you. Mm-hmm. Louisiana, John Kennedy is one of their U.S. senators. Gary Chambers, a black dude, ran against them. He ran on a platform of legalizing marijuana.
Yeah, he was smoking weed in his campaign.
Progressive.
Right?
Literally. Progressive.
That was tight.
He was a shock to the system.
Yeah,
the Democratic Party, when they had their primary, he won, but the chair, the Democratic Party chair, would not concede him winning outright and said basically all three of y'all could be on the ballot.
Yeah. Because he smoked the marijuana.
It wasn't even that, in my opinion. It's the Democratic Party chair in Louisiana at that time was she might as well have been a Republican light.
Oh,
I got you.
We get those.
We're running out of time.
Yeah,
but real quick, what are your thoughts on the Philadelphia Eagles, who just won the Super Bowl, not attending the White House ceremony that has been a tradition for years? After you win a championship, you go to the White House. You know, it's kind of like a big show and stuff like that. The Philadelphia Eagles, NFL, they're not going to do it this year. What do you think?
AJ?
I don't have any problem with it. I think they are standing on their principles, obviously. I think, people expect a certain level of decorum and yada, yada, yada from folks on the left and expect us to always be tolerant and all of that. And the Eagles are showing that, no, there's a principle, there's a line that they're not willing to cross. And it's free speech. There's nothing that says they have to.
You're right.
So I have no problem with it.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think they standing on business. I mean, hell, and the whole NFL is DEI. If it wasn't for that, you wouldn't have an NFL. You know what I'm saying?
I got you.
You know what I mean? So, hey.
Yeah. I mean, my thoughts on it is, it's consistent with what people have done in the past, so I don't think anybody should be too surprised by it,
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, multiple teams haven't done it while Trump was in office, and then there's multiple people who haven't attended, although their team might have attended.
Yeah.
So, I think expect more of this, So, that's the way I feel about it.
And it shouldn't be no surprise. I mean, this is an unorthodox administration.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We shouldn't be surprised by anything we've seen. If we see something actually move accordingly political, then we should be shocked.
Maybe they didn't want McDonald's.
Exactly.
Maybe they didn't want McDonald's.
Right? Maybe that is it.
They didn't want that.
Yeah. Word. Well, hey, this has been the Black Summit.
But before we get up, man, Let his brother tell them how to get in touch with you if you want them to
Yeah.
follow you with all you got going
Oh
on, with all you
man.
doing.
So yeah, I got a Facebook page that I'm not on. I'm primarily on TikTok. At Anjane Anjene Davis on TikTok. I am on Instagram. I need to get back on there. At Mr. Community Davis. And I am starting a Patreon specific to this and a YouTube channel called Here's the Thing. So I will make sure you guys have that as soon as they're up and running.
Word.
Definitely.
Sounds
man.
good.
Yeah, and we will definitely support, my brother. Definitely
Absolutely.
support. We appreciate you.
And I
thanks
want
for coming
to
on.
tell y'all, thank y'all. I will
Yeah.
forever say, and I hope everybody watching, these are the types of media outlets and media sources that really speak to real issues without a corporate varnish. So definitely subscribe, support, share out. This is a new age in communication. So
Yeah. Thank you, man.
Word.
Appreciate you
Appreciate
for
it.
joining us, man.
All right.
All right. Black Summit. I'm Hendrix.
I'm Brooks.
And we are out.
We out.
Peace.
Peace.